Hello and welcome. I am Devika Chopra and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of our top stories. President Donald Trump has vowed to stick to his policies as new US tariffs triggered sharp falls in global stock markets, and he pledged investors in the country would benefit. South Korea's Constitutional Court unanimously removes President Yoon Suk-yeol from office. The decision follows his December declaration of martial law, which triggered outrage and a parliamentary vote to impeach. The Sixth BIMSTEC Summit begins in Bangkok, with leaders from 7 nations meeting to strengthen ties on trade, security and climate in the Bay of Bengal. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chief Advisor for Bangladesh Mohammad Yunus meet for the first time since the ouster of Sheikh Hasina. Israel says it has killed Hamas commander Hassan Farhat in a strike on Sidon, southern Lebanon. Lebanese officials say 3 died in the attack, which the Lebanese Prime Minister calls a violation of the US-backed ceasefire. Russia launches a wave of drone attacks on eastern Ukraine, killing 3 and wounding dozens. Kharkiv bears the brunt as fighting escalates across the region. At least 7 are killed as spring storms unleash tornadoes and floods across a wide swath from Texas to Ohio. The National Weather Service warns of more rain, flash floods and tornadoes as the system stalls over the Midwest. More than 40 people, mostly women and children, have been killed in a series of attacks across villages in Plateau State of Nigeria. Local authorities report mass burials as Red Cross teams continue recovery efforts. British Foreign Minister David Lammy says London and Washington are in discussions over a possible economic deal as he arrives in Brussels for talks. The comment comes after President Trump imposed a 10% tariff on the United Kingdom. And our top focus, former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott joined us on NewsX World and weighed in on the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, urging for a swift and fair end to the conflict. Abbott highlights the massive toll on both civilian and military lives and warns of significant global economic disruption, particularly in countries reliant on Ukrainian grains. He believes the war must end soon, but stresses that any peace must be based on fairness. Abbott also emphasizes the need for meaningful security guarantees if Ukraine is forced to give up territory to Russia. He believes foreign troops, particularly Indian forces, could act as effective deterrents and ensure lasting peace. Abbott praises Ukrainian President Zelensky for his leadership, saying he's been extraordinary in wartime. However, Abbott also recognizes the difficulty of holding elections during a conflict. As for Europe's sanctions on Russia, Abbott supports their continuation as long as Russia's aggression persists. Let's listen into what the former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott had to say to NewsX World.
It would be good for everyone if this war could end, because not only has the war caused massive casualties in Ukraine, civilian casualties as well as military ones, not only has the war caused massive losses to the Russian armed forces, but it's caused significant economic disruption all around the world, particularly in countries which are dependent upon Ukrainian grains for their food supply. So the sooner we can end this war, the better, but it's got to end on a fair basis. I think that put him in a league of his own when it comes to wartime leadership. It certainly made him stand out as the complete opposite to the leaders of Afghanistan, who were happy to flee the country in a helicopter with a bag of cash once the Taliban were advancing on their capital. So I think that President Zelensky has demonstrated enormous personal courage. I think he's demonstrated enormous political integrity. And I think the success of his country in holding off this much larger Russian attack for over 3 years now testifies to the quality of his leadership.
Interesting points raised there by Tony Abbott. Joining me on the broadcast is Marian Duris, foreign affairs expert. I also have with me Andrea Lucidi, war reporter, joining us from Russian Donbass region. Let me begin this conversation with Andrea Lucidi. Andrea Lucidi, I want to understand from your perspective, Tony Abbott has spoken about the possible role that could be played by countries such as India in putting an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. What are your thoughts on the same?
Well, from the Russian point of view, it's not Russia. It's not hostile to speak about the possibility to deploy of a possible peacekeeping force in Ukraine, if this force is made by soldiers from countries that are not in the NATO and are not from countries that are supporting one of the two parts in the conflict. India, for example, have maintained during these years a neutral position. The leadership of India always spoke about peace, about the necessity of diplomacy in this conflict. And for this reason, the position of India is, from my point of view, very good for a possible work with Russia and Ukraine for a peace deal, of course.
Mr. Lucidi, at the same time, I want to understand from your perspective, when Anthony Abbott talks about peace should be based on fairness, what could that possibly mean? When we talk about a peace deal that will be fair, what does that look like for the world?
Well, we have two different positions in this conflict, of course. There is the Ukrainian position where Zelensky is spoken always about the necessity for Ukraine to join in the NATO, to have security guarantee from the US and from the European partners. And at the opposite side, we have the Russian request about permanent neutrality of Ukraine, and the necessity that Ukraine will not join the NATO, because for Russia, for the Russian leadership, the presence of Ukraine in the NATO bloc is one of the main reasons, because the conflict was exploded in 2022. And many times the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, and the spokesman of Kremlin, Dmitry Peskov, say that Russia is available to speak about a peace deal, but this is for speak about peace is necessary from the Russian side to have complete all the objectives that they have in the military operation. For the report that we have from the Russian Ministry of Defense, they say that the objectives are almost completed, but the main question on the table still the joining of Ukraine in NATO. And till the Ukrainian leadership will not leave this idea, I think will be very, very difficult to speak about peace. But in this day, we saw that the envoy of Vladimir Putin, Kirill Dmitriev, is in Washington, and he said in Washington yesterday that he spoke with some official from the Trump administration about a normalization of the relationship between US and Russia. And I think this is a very big progress for the way to have a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia.
Okay, Mr. Lucidi, thank you so much for joining us. Let me also bring into the conversation Marian Duris at this point in time. Marian Duris, Anthony Abbott, when speaking to NewsX World, spoke about the continuation of European sanctions against Russia. Have those sanctions really proven to be effective?
Yes, when you mentioned effectiveness of these sanctions, Yeah, when it was first time proposed, this anti-Russia sanctions, so there was said, and there was some kind of declaration that these sanctions will stop the war, will break the Russian economy. So this was rhetoric, these was statements of European leaders. In the end, we don't see results like this. We see the war is continuing. Russian economics is doing quite in standard way, it's normal way, it's not breaking down. So in this sense, effectiveness of the sanctions is not very good. Of course, sanctions have some influence. It's for sure. Yes, so Russian economics is hurting in some ways. And yes, it's a tool what can be used in discussions between United States and Russia, and maybe between Europe and Russia. But I would like to see more effort from European leaders to talk with Russia about these things, about possible relations in the future, about stopping the war, and what are interests and goals of both sides in this sense. So don't just not let this discussion on the American side and Russian side. On the other side, we see European leaders make some own formats, own summits about Ukraine and its war. I think European leaders should do more. What about discussion between all actors who are participating on this situation and this tragic war?
Myron Juris, I also want to understand from you, in the present global scenario, if there are countries that must join the mediation process, what names would you propose would be best in terms of bringing both Russia and Ukraine to the table for discussions?
I think this is very good signal when we see discussions between United States and Russia, because I consider these two sides or two parties like the most influential and the most significant in this situation. So Europe, okay, Europe has a different perspective in this sense, but I think we should appreciate effort of Donald Trump, willingness of Kremlin's or Russian administration to discuss, and of course we should appreciate as well Middle East countries who provide so good environment for these discussions, and yes, so we should appreciate it. And as I said before, I think more actors in international environment should participate to this kind of discussions, because it's not only about Ukraine. It's discussion how will sovereignty or territorial integrity will look like in the future, how big powers will act in the international relations. So this is very important discussion what we should participate, and not just let it on the United States and Russia.
All right, Mr. Juris, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX World. We leave it there. US President Donald Trump's tariffs have caused chaos in global markets, with stock markets in the US, Europe and Asia plunging in response. The S&P 500 saw its biggest loss since 2020, dropping 4.8%, while the Nasdaq fell 6% and the Dow Jones dropped 4%. Trump remained defiant, insisting that the US economy will come out stronger after these measures. He has claimed that the US is undergoing a massive economic reconstruction. China has announced that it will impose a 34% tariff on all US imports starting 10th April, retaliating against US President Donald Trump's new 34% tariff on Chinese goods, escalating trade tensions between the two nations. Meanwhile, Philippe Monnier, a former executive director of the Greater Geneva Bern area, has criticized the United States' reciprocal tariffs, calling them a violation of WTO rules and detrimental to both domestic and global economies. Here's what he said.
WTO rules you have to follow the most favored nation principle. It is not the same as reciprocal tariff. On this other thing is that if you have some disagreement, you should not take some unilateral decision. There are some specific dispute mechanism, and you have to use those mechanisms if you disagree.
Meanwhile, the French Prime Minister has said that thousands of jobs are at risk as well. Listen in.
Première inquiétude, celle qui est la plus grave, celle qui doit nous alerter, c'est pour les producteurs français, pour les entreprises qui produisent et exportent aux États-Unis. Et vous voyez bien que, par exemple, dans le domaine agricole, dans le domaine viticole, dans le domaine des spiritueux, il y a des dizaines de milliers d'emplois qui sont menacés. Alors les optimistes disent, bon, il va y avoir une confrontation et puis après ça va se lever rapidement. Et nous, notre responsabilité, c'est d'envisager de suivre ça, comme vous savez.
Additionally, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Shiba called the tariffs a national crisis and said that the government is working hard to minimize the impact. He urged a calm-headed approach in negotiations with the US. Ishiba ordered his ministers to closely study the tariffs and consider supporting domestic industries and jobs. Japan's government also expressed serious concerns about whether the new tariffs comply with international trade agreements. The IMF has cautioned that these tariffs represent a significant risk to the global economic outlook with possible negative impacts on global trade. Taking the conversation forward, I have with me Lord Rami Ranger, member of House of Lords of the UK, with us. Lord Ranger, thank you so much for speaking with NewsX World. I, of course, begin by asking you, how exactly is the United Kingdom preparing itself for what the world will be witnessing in the months to come?
I'm sorry, my computer is just playing up. 1 second. Right. Yeah, these are very difficult times because, we are a global economy. The world is a global economy. And if one country behaves in an irrational manner, the effect is global. So the America being the #1 economy of the world, where people depend on trade, there's so many things, which we buy from America and we export to America. So there will be a very big effect. The prices will go through the roof. And not only that, there'll be unemployment, there'll be a lot of factory closures, which depends on the American market. It is one of the biggest markets in the world. So therefore, the United Kingdom has been a very close ally of the United States. And I hope they will have some agreement where they will try to minimize the effect of these tariffs, which the President Trump wishes to impose. But at the same time, short term, there will be a very big shock to the stock market, to the world market. So I think it's a very uncertain thing how this is going to pan out. But I think there will definitely be price rises because, Americans are used to buy cheap imported stuff from America. If they have to go up, then effect will be on inflation, unemployment. So it's a snowball effect. So we will not be isolated in United Kingdom.
Absolutely. At the same time, Lord Ranger, what exactly do you think will happen in the next few months? Do you feel that the tariffs imposed by the US could possibly open up other avenues and opportunities for other nations to explore as well?
Well, initially, there will be a shock. There will be a lot of disruption, but eventually the countries will wake up. The country will start to depend on their own self. There will be a lot of industry which will get a boost, which were not able to compete with the Chinese import. So there will be a long-term benefit. It could prove beneficial in the long run. But there are very small countries, who will not be able to withstand what a big economy like India, Japan, Korea, and United Kingdom and Europe can. So therefore, in the long run, there will be more trade agreement between various countries. More alliances will be forged, to counteract this unilateral decision by America to change the goalpost overnight. So I think initially there will be a lot of upheaval, but in the long run, there are economies, very big economies, because if they start boycotting American product, which I've seen, a lot of people are now removing American product from their shelves as a retaliation, as a protest, just to warn America that they could end up losing so much. You can imagine the amount of business Americans do with the world. Everything we buy from America. So therefore, it is going to be a very long haul battle between America and the rest of the world.
Absolutely. Lord Rami Ranger, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX World. In other news, South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol has been removed from office, ending 8 months of legal battles. The Constitutional Court upheld his impeachment over his decision to impose martial law last year, which caused a political crisis. A new presidential election must be held within 60 days. Until then, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo will serve as the acting president. The court said Yoon violated his duty and called his martial law decree a serious challenge to democracy. It also stated that his actions created chaos in South Korea's economy and foreign policy. Listen in.
국가 원리와 민주국가 원리의 기본 원칙들을 위반한 것으로 그 자체로 헌법 질서를 침해하고 민주공화정의 안정성에 심각한 위해를 끼쳤습니다. 재판관 전원의 일치된 의견으로 주문을 선고합니다. 탄핵 사건이므로 선고 시각을 확인하겠습니다. 지금 시각은 오전 11시 22분입니다. 주문 피청구인 대통령 윤석열을 파면한다.
Meanwhile, supporters of Yoon reacted angrily while anti-Yoon protesters celebrated the ruling. The court rejected Yoon's defense that martial law was necessary and said that it lacked legal justification. Yoon's party has accepted the court's verdict, while opposition leader Lee Jae-myung praised the decision. The issue has been hugely divisive, with major crowds taking to the streets both for and against Yoon's removal. In a short statement after the verdict, Yoon said, and I quote, "I am truly sorry and heartbroken that I was unable to meet the nation's expectations." Joining me on the broadcast is Dr. Sanjay Kumar.
현직 국가 원수의 탄핵이라는 불행한 상황이 발생한 것을 무겁게 생각합니다. 주권자인 국민 여러분의 뜻을 받들어 헌법과 법률에 따라 다음 정부가 차질 없이 출범할 수 있도록 자기 대통령 선거 관리에 최선을 다하겠습니다.
Joining me on the broadcast is Dr. Sanjay Kumar, journalist at the Korea Herald. Dr. Sanjay Kumar, I want to understand from you what really has been the impact on the ground in South Korea of the big verdict.
On the ground, because of this verdict, the people are very much politically polarized. As you have correctly mentioned that Yoon supporters and anti-Yoon forces are very much divided like never before. And it is a great setback, very big setback to Yoon supporters who were considering that he is going to remain in power. But of course, majority here, especially the young generation, you can say, or the liberals here, or you can say the Democratic Party forces, they have considered it as a win of the democratic win. And the Constitutional Court judges also, entire 8 judges unanimously have considered Yoon responsible for this whole martial law and political turmoil, and they have considered this as a very grave violation of the Constitution. So in this way, one side is very happy and welcoming the whole the whole process of this justice, and they are rejoicing it. They are considering as restoration of the democratic principles in Korea. But on the other hand, there are Yoon supporters who are not even ready to accept this judgment. They consider that even this judgment is very much politically biased, and they are not ready to accept it. So this is going to cause maybe we can see escalated rallies in coming days, especially tomorrow. We can see in the afternoon one protest has been called by a religious leader. So this is the situation on the ground. But the major challenge to Korean people is the elections, the new elections, because within 60 days, as per the constitutional norms, a new president has to be in power. So that means within 10 days, the acting president has to declare elections, and already people are in election mode now. So there is a leadership vacuum as well in the People Power Party, the Yoon's party. So like who is going to like contest the elections? And it is not going to be a very easy thing. They are in troubled water. So PPP, especially the ruling party, and these Yoon supporters are in big trouble right now. You can see from that perspective, nothing good is coming to them. But on the other side, it's a very good news for Democratic Party forces.
Okay.
And the opposition party, Lee Jae-myung, like many here are seeing him as likely to be the next president. Although it is very early to say, because you know when people are polarized politically in up to this extent, then you know issues of economic and economic security and hard power security comes into. You know, you might be aware very well that the Trump tariffs is not sending good signals to Korean economy. So already Korean people are very much concerned about this tariff war going on. And many Korean companies are also facing problems, and at the same time, and at the same time, because of the growing link of North Korea and Russia, is also causing a threat to the South Korean security as well. So you know there are many challenges for the new leader also to one time to balance the US-Korea alliance, and at the same time balance the security aspects with North Korea. So these are the challenges. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Kumar, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX World. Well, that's all that we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world. Stay tuned.